Hi everyone, my name is Brittany and I'm the marketing person for VCare. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on our webinar about enabling best practice pain management in aged care. Before we start, could everyone please introduce themselves in the chat and where you're from? And that would be a great way of just knowing who we're talking to. I'm just going to share my screen quickly, which is the presentation, just one moment. So presenting in this webinar today, we've got David Alsop, who's the Head of Business and Development.
I'm here. Yeah, I was.
Can everyone please put their things on mute as well?
Just give me a moment, I'll just make sure everyone's on mute.
Yeah.
That's everyone, I think. Perfect. Cool. And then we've got James Mathias, who's the Global Product Manager at Painkchek, and Nazif Khan, who's the Client Solutions Manager at VCare. So just a little bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded, and we'll send this recording along with the white paper, Pain and Dementia, Common Challenges for Care Managers, by email after this webinar. Please send your questions through if you have any, and we'll answer them when we can. If you have a private question that you wouldn't like to share, then please feel free to send it through to VCare Marketing, and we can send you a response privately. So I'll just quickly go through the agenda for today. We've got the importance of accurate pain assessment and management and the role of technology and AI in aged care. And we've got David, the Business Development Manager at Painkchek, going through all of that. Then we've got the overview and live demonstration of Painkchek. And then we'll have James, the Global Product Manager from Painkchek, going through that. And then that will lead on to Nazif from VCare, who will do a walkthrough of the Painkchek and VCare integration alongside how to use Painkchek with care plans. And then we'll have some time for some questions and answers. So I will just pass this on to David now, and he'll take over.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, team. I'm just saying host disabled participant screen sharing. Sorry, Brittany, if you just want to enable that, please. Right. Great.
Perfect. So you try that now.
There we go. Thank you, team. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for making the time to join us today. I know it's been quite a challenging few months in both our countries. We're based here in Sydney, Australia, and across the ditch in New Zealand. So thank you so much for making the time. Great to see some familiar faces on here too. But a big thank you as well to to Chris, Naz, and Brittany, and the whole VCare team for enabling today. We're so excited about this partnership. So thank you to the VCare team. So team, I'm going to take through today, I suppose, Painkchek, the importance of AI and the background and context, and then obviously hand over to my colleague James to take through a live demonstration. But I think it's worth starting out the purpose or our mission at Painkchek, and it really is to give a voice to people who cannot reliably verbalize their pain. So I'll take you through this presentation. I'll really focus on people living with some form of cognitive impairment or delirium, or people that you don't trust can self-report, which is a large cohort of people living in your care centres there in New Zealand. Quick background and context in Painkchek, and I'll get to this throughout the presentation as well, but we're an Australian founded innovation, founded out of Western Australia at Curtin University, but we've really been focusing on the Australian market for obvious reasons, being a local founded innovation. The last 2 years has been challenging, obviously, for any sort of travel, but we are based here in Sydney, Australia head office, but I've got staff across the country, but we work with about 60% of the aged care industry here in the Australian market. It's about 1,600 aged care facilities covering about 130,000 beds. So we are the most widely used clinical software system in the Australian market, and really excited to be taking this innovation across to New Zealand with VCare as a partner. But we really are focusing on those two markets. We have a team in the United Kingdom as well, and working with Singapore and across the EU and Canada as well at this stage. But our real focus is looking at cohorts of people who cannot express or reliably report their pain. So you can imagine residential aged care, as we call it in Australia, or care centres, as you call it there in New Zealand, has been our main focus for people living with a high acuity of some form of cognitive impairment. Obviously looking at other markets like home care, disability, and acute hospitals for that same reason when people can't self-report. So team, I think the importance of accurately assessing pain in cohorts of people living in care centres, it's quite obvious, but see, there's something, I suppose, the glaring stats that we've been looking at. And it looks at about 80% of people living in aged have chronic pain, some sort of arthritis or is generally the most common thing we see, but osteoarthritis has been another common one. The second stat here has actually increased significantly from a recent piece of work we've done in the Australian market over the last 2 years. About 62% of people living in the Australian aged care market have some form of cognitive impairment. And I think as a global movement, really people looking to stay at home longer in aged care, residential aged care, as we call it, or care centres, are really becoming more focused on end of life and dementia care. So we're only going to see that increase quite rapidly. Unfortunately, as we all know, team, dementia is not going anywhere. There's no cure at this stage, and it's increasing globally at about a 3% rate, which is quite alarming. But team, quite obviously, pain is difficult to assess. But pain in someone that cannot articulate or verbalise, it's profoundly difficult to assess. So it really is challenging for clinicians to make a really good informed decision. I'll touch on this a bit later, but we often would misdiagnose or use subjective rating tools to get the outcome at this stage. But we'll talk about how we can actually address it with Painkchek. And obviously the adverse impact of someone living in chronic pain is that quality of life decreases. There is operationally some issues and efficiencies there, and compliance issues if we don't manage and address pain upfront and well. So some of the benefits, I suppose, team, of accurately addressing pain. So that improving the quality of life is quite obvious, but we're really trying to address the rate of use of psychotropic medications and reducing behaviours. And there's a lot of chat in the Australian market, I'm sure in the New Zealand market as well, around the incorrect use of psychotropic medications. We like to think at Painkchek rightful medications. So if it is the dementia driving those behaviours, yes, that's correct. Let's try these antipsychotics. But if it is pain, let's address that pain first and hopefully reduce those behaviours and make sure it's a rightful medication. Obviously, if someone's in pain, they're vulnerable for infection and illness. We're looking to address that pain, manage that pain to make sure that they are not subject to the infection or illness and make sure the immunity is strong. We're a medical device, which we'll touch on in a few minutes. So we are a funding base here in the Australian and New Zealand market in regards to the funding models you are working under and support the accreditation standards, obviously, of someone living a pain-free life. So Tim, I think it's just worth touching on this slide very quickly. And I think it paints a really nice narrative around the evolution of pain assessment in people living with dementia. As you can see, the AGS there came out in 2002, the Pain Act in 2003, but I think most people will be common with the Abbey Pain Scale that was found in 2004. And then Painkchek's inception into the market in the early 2017. What I find quite fascinating about this is that you can see these tools and scales evolved quite rapidly by knowledge and more evidence-based and more research on an annual basis. And there's a huge 13-year chasm between the inception of Painkchek and the Abbey Pain Scale in 2004. So it's worth mentioning right now that we work closely with Jennifer Abbey from the Abbey Pain Scale fame. I think that's probably the most commonly used tool for pain assessment, this cohort of people pre-Painkchek. Jennifer Abbey's a huge supporter of what we've done. She sees this kind of building in her work. And I think she puts it quite nicely going, this is the natural evolution of pain assessment, combining best in breed process with a modernized framework with best in breed technology. Well, I think it's quite fascinating. We forget that, I suppose, smart devices, they only came out really in 2008, 2009, were readily used from 2010 onwards. We're kind of connected to them all day, every day right now, team. So we kind of feel like we had them forever. But you think things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, those kind of words in 2004, very much buzzwords, but very much used in modern day, I suppose, practice clinically these days, but also in our lives. And let's just log into our phones using AI. So 2004, when that Abbey Pain Scale was created, very much a concept that AI was coming, now very much used in everyday practice. And I'll get on how we can use AI really efficiently to give clinicians another string to their bow to assess pain in a few minutes. So what I'll touch on now is that AI component, but I think it really is worth looking at the research and why Painkchek went down the road of using AI in an overall pain assessment tool as part of that framework, which James will take you through that end-to-end assessment quite shortly. So what I'll kind of take you through is 3 key points of the research from our studies. Like I said, we found out at Curtin University, we've got extensive studies, clinical papers, all published on our website, our validity and reliability studies. So please, if you need links to that, let us know and we can supply that. But like I said, it's all live on our website. But the 3 key things today, team, for the sake of time, I'll take through is those findings that made us go down the AI path. So the first thing was that people living with some form of dementia express pain in a more heightened manner on their face as opposed to your eye. The reason being is that they've lost what we call learnt behaviours. So an example of this would be, I'm in a meeting with our friends at VCare and I can say, I kick my shin on the table. I can put a brave stoic face on, pretend it didn't happen and press on with the meeting. Unfortunately, our friends with dementia, they've lost that learnt behaviour to fake it. So that face becomes a really good insight to someone's pain. We consider the kind of the tip of the iceberg. It's a great place to start, team, but pain is multifaceted and multifunctional, so we need to dig deeper, but that facial part is a really good indication to then dig further. The second key thing from that research is that the human face is what we call plastic. So male, female, race, gender, it doesn't matter. We all have the same micro muscle movements in our faces indicative of human emotion. There's 52 micro muscle movements on the face there. 9 of those are indicative of pain, which is quite fascinating as well. And when we say micro faces, not macro, so these aren't forced movements, these are involuntary micro movements in the face. And finally, looking at previous pain tools like the Abbey Pain Scale and HS, we researched and looked and found that they're very much prone to what we call clinical subjectivity. So what does that mean? So I'm a physiotherapist by background. So for example, if I'm assessing my colleague James and I can see James is guarding his right shoulder, in my clinical opinion, that may be severe. But in another clinician's opinion, that could be mild, and another clinician's opinion, that could be moderate. So it wasn't a consistent framework for every clinician to pick up and put down and go through the same process to get a consistent pain score and pain rating. So there are 3 of the key findings, team, quite rudely kind of compressing 4 or 5 years of significant research into those 3 key findings that I think relevant for today. So we thought, okay, so what is the most subjective part of the assessment? And we landed on the face is probably the most subjective, but the most readily available as well. So it's quite challenging sometimes because you look at someone's face and go, does Dave always have that brow lowering? Is he always kind of just grimacing? Is that how Dave is? Or is he in pain? So we thought, okay, 1, the most subjective, 2, the most available and a great place to start a pain assessment. But 3, we can incorporate machine learning and artificial intelligence to streamline this process to give a clinician a binary outcome. So the idea is, team, is clinicians taking away that guesswork, I suppose, going, is Dave just grimacing? Is there something else wrong, or is it pain? So ruling in or ruling out pain. I'm a massive believer it's just as important to rule in pain to rule out pain, to look at that antecedent being pain or something else, than treating those behaviours and getting the right consequence for a resident. So team, I think I'll talk about Painkchek and have incorporated that AI into the tool, and the reason being. So who are we? We're obviously a medical device in the form of an app. We do use smartphones and tablets to perform that AI component of the assessment, which we'll touch on in a few minutes, and combined with another binary checklist regarding other domains like vocalization, the movement, to take away that clinical subjectivity. Like I said, the AI component is used to take away that subjectivity, to take away, I suppose, the most prone and challenging place to assess, which is the face, but the most readily available, like I said, so very accessible for most of our residents as well. But before I touch more on the tool, I think it's really key to focus on the 3 key clinical outcomes we're looking to achieve. And it really is, team, identifying the presence of pain when it isn't obvious. So I've worked in aged care for about 15 years, and I've seen how challenging it is and how pressed for time registered nurses, carers, facility managers are, and really is to try to give them another string to their bow going, is David in pain? I'm not sure. Let's use Painkchek to find out, to really give them that, like I said, assistance in doing so when it's not obvious. Painkchek then will quantify that severity of pain. So put a resident in a category of no pain, mild, moderate, or severe. A bit like the Abbey Pain Scale there, we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. We do have a lot more different checkpoints, but we still categorize into one of those domains. And quite nicely, and this is where we kind of pivot to Nazif and the VCare team, the real-time monitoring and effectiveness of interventions is what we're looking to drive to make sure that no one is suffering in silence and that pain is managed and addressed in real time, which we'll touch on during the demonstration and integration into VCare. So team, in summary, looking at the pain checkout, what we did was created the facial part to be completely automated, looking at those 9 micromuscle movements indicative of pain. The research shows us as most residents do express pain in their face that are living with dementia, majority do, some don't. So it's not, the face is not the be all and end all, it's a really good place to start and a really good indication to dig deeper. So what we've done there across other domains, like I said, across the movement, the activity, the voice, the behavior, and the body domain, we've made it a binary checklist for a clinician to observe a resident at the point of care and go through these indicative pain cues in this domain to see if it's there or it's not there. So yes, this pain feature is here. Someone's groaning and moaning, for example, in the vocal domain, or it's not there. The idea there is, team, is we're taking away that subjectivity once again. We're really making a completely non-subjective binary process. And that's the idea of Painkchek, to really take away that guesswork. And that will roll up to an overall pain score and pain severity. And we'll talk about what we can do once we've done that assessment, those data flows, in a few minutes as well. I think it's worth quickly mentioning, and James will touch on this during the demonstration, but as you can imagine, we're working with about 60% of the residential aged care or care centre cohort here in Australia, and they love Painkchek. They've been using it for like 3 or 4 years now. Majority of our clients said, hey, this is a great tool, but we don't want to have one pain assessment process for people living with dementia and another people that can reliably verbalize their pain. Can we incorporate that into Painkchek? So what we've done is we call it the universal solution, and we've incorporated, which most people here would be familiar with, is the numeric rating scale into Painkchek as well. So for people who can reliably articulate their pain, you can have that conversation, use a digitized numeric rating scale, save that, and that gets recorded to our backend and integrates into VCare as well. But what we're quite see commonly with people in living with dementia, with early onset dementia, sometimes they can reliably assess self-report and have that conversation like we're having today. But unfortunately, the next day, potentially, they may have lost that cognition. So they do fluctuate between reliably being able to self-report and obviously needing to take that subjectivity out of it and not trusting they can self-report using the traditional Painkchek tool. So we can fluctuate between those two tools. The idea, team, here is that we are a solution to assess pain for everyone, everywhere in an aged care facility or care centre. So in summary, I suppose some of the key benefits, which I'll touch on quickly, is that automation. So obviously, we can look at automating that key assessment process using technology and that integration into VCare and into our backend and take away that subjectivity, make an objective process. We're really to empower your carers, your RNs. We really like to broaden out the use of Painkchek to really facilitate a clinical conversation, say between care and registered nurse and GP. We're a swift, rapid tool. So all our team of clinical specialists like registered nurses and pharmacists train staff on how to use Painkchek. Once proficient on the tool, it takes about 2 minutes to actually do an end-to-end assessment. And once again, we can be assessed that resident's facing 3 or 4 meters away. We don't want to be sitting on top of a resident. We don't want to be invading their privacy or jamming a phone in their face. So the great thing about the machine learning process is the more information we feed it, the smarter it gets. And we can obviously make sure there's a good piece of space between us and the resident. Like I said, we're looking to improve those clinical outcomes. We're making an objective, consistent process for a carer or clinician to assess. All that documentation automatically goes through to our backend into VCare, which I won't steal Naz and James's thunder. I'll let them talk about that. But we're obviously a medical device, TGA approved here in Australia and across Europe as well. But we're looking at being a robust evidence base to support care planning and quality standards. And Nazif, once again, will touch on those workflows through VCare as well. So at this stage, I might pause there and just hand over to my colleague, James. I've kind of told you about the context, the background, the research, the importance of that AI, but I think more importantly, let's see how it works. So James, I'll just hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, everyone. So my name's James. I'm the Global Product Manager specifically for integration partnerships here at Painkchek, which means, yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you not only about the tool, but to see that demonstration, as we've of course seen, of how everything works with VCare. So I'm going to begin sharing my screen now to give you a bit of a look at the Painkchek app itself. Now, David, can you give me a thumbs up? You can see that on screen. Wonderful. So what we're looking at here is the login screen of the Painkchek app. Painkchek's an app that sits on any smart device you may choose to use. I'm using an iPhone today. You could use an iPad, an Android phone, or an Android tablet. We're going to go ahead and log in. And log in with Painkchek when you're on the floor actually conducting, carrying out care is pretty quick and easy. Simply select your name from a list and enter a 4-digit PIN. And it's up to you to set what this PIN is when you first set up your login, just like a lot of other apps and digital services. Once you're in the system, you can go ahead and see, well, first we're looking at the dashboard. So we can go ahead and see some of our key residents. You can see that up top, I've got a favorited resident, Mr. Alan Mosby there. And down below, we can see my recent assessments. Now, before I give you a bit of a tour around the application, I think the most important thing we want to look at is that actual assessment process. So I won't waste any time and I'll get straight into that. So I'm going to first go to, I could select any of my residents from the dashboard here. I can also tap on my full resident list down the bottom with just that people, could also be called a residence option. And this information, all of the details of all of our residents, is one of the great things that we can do with that integration with VCare. So instead of updating a resident's details in multiple places, VCare is the source of truth for resident information. If an update occurs to a resident, so a new admission, a departure, an update to someone's details, they're going to be automatically reflected here. You can find the person in your list, you can search for them up top, or of course, you can just tap on that person there to get more details. So I've selected Mr. Mosby here, Alan. You can see that little star next to Alan's profile picture. That's just indicating that he's a favorite of mine, someone who I might need to assess on a regular basis. And below that, we can see Alan's pain assessment record. You can see Alan hasn't been assessed a great deal, just a single assessment in there. And I'll talk more about reviewing results of assessments in just a moment. But now I'm going to click that big green button down the bottom that says Assess Pain. So when I go to assess pain, the first question that the system's going to ask me is, well, what type of assessment are we going to use today? Is it going to be a numerical rating scale, as David mentioned, for someone who is able to reliably report their pain, can articulate that to us? Or is it going to be a Painkchek pain assessment? So that's our observational assessment using that facial analysis, amongst other things, for someone who cannot reliably self-report their pain due to dementia or some other form of cognitive impairment. So to start us off today, we're going to go ahead and look at that Painkchek pain assessment. So I've just selected that there, and you can see the system has confirmed for me down the bottom. You've selected Painkchek because Alan was unable to reliably report their pain. So I'm going to press next. And we've got a couple of questions to get us started. The first question here is about the resident's activity status. So are they at rest or have they just been moving around? This is a question that generally isn't asked a great deal when assessing pain using other tools, but we found it to be exceptionally important when reviewing the outcomes of a pain assessment. When someone's at rest, they're lying down, they're sitting down, they're comfortable. And I can speak for myself certainly, but for more or less anyone, if you're experiencing pain and you're sitting down, lying down, you're going to put your body in a position, as much as you can, given your mobility, but you're going to put your body in a position that minimizes that pain. You're going to make yourself as comfortable as you can. So an at-rest assessment, we're seeing a baseline of what someone is experiencing. It's not necessarily representative of the peaks of pain that someone may experience. So we then think of a post-movement assessment. Someone's been moving around, walking, transferring, dressing and undressing, showering, anything like that. Their body's moving, their joints, limbs are moving, nociception, the experience of pain is occurring. We can say that if someone has just been moving, this is likely the peak of pain that they would be experiencing day to day. And that gets borne out in the research and the stats from I think we're over 500,000 assessments conducted to date. So we know that someone is nearly 3.5 times more likely to experience severe pain post-movement compared to when they are at rest. I think it's about 2.5 times more likely to experience moderate pain. I think 1.5 or 2 times more likely to experience mild pain compared again to that at-rest status. So really important that we always capture those post-movement assessments and document them here so we can review later what was the status of that person at the time of the assessment. Below that, we have a question about facial analysis. So this is our AI-driven facial analysis. We've got 2 options here. The first one is a video facial analysis. So that's actually using the camera in your device to look at your resident's face and identify any of 9 different micro expressions which are indicative of pain, as Dave mentioned earlier. There's also a manual option because we need to make sure that this tool is going to be useful anytime, no matter the circumstances. So there will be some circumstances where the camera just can't see someone's face. It could be as simple as it being quite late in the evening, lights are switched off. Switching them on will disturb our resident. We don't want to do that. So we'll observe with our eyes, which are better than the camera, and then document those micro expressions manually. Could also be maybe someone's being aggressive or physically threatening. We want to observe and then step away to complete that assessment. In general, however, we're always going to use that video facial analysis wherever possible. So we're going to begin our assessment now. When I press next, it's going to open up the camera in my device. I'm going to be using the selfie camera to give you a little bit of a demo today, and I'm going to do my best to fake some expressions of pain. We'll see how good an actor I am. I will flag, though, that my track record is not incredible. I am a poor actor, but I'll do my best. And then we'll be going through our remaining 5 domains. So you'll see that camera open up. In general, you'd use the reverse camera on your device, and you can be up to a couple of meters away from your resident. So I will be up close and personal, but you very much do not need to be. Alrighty. So when we see the camera open, I'll do my best to simulate an expression of pain. When the camera finds my face, the screen will go from gray to clear, and then we'll do a 3-second facial analysis. So here we go. There I am, hello, and now I'll be in pain. All right, well, I did better than I anticipated. So of those 9 potential micro expressions indicative of pain, you can see that the system identified 2 of those on my face, tightening of eyelids and closing my eyes. So for the remaining facial features, I was definitely trying to fake a couple of these, clearly unsuccessfully. The system has toggled those off. If this were a manual assessment, it would be up to me to document which of these micro expressions I could observe. So, of course, we cover how to do that and how to code those facial expressions in our training, both face-to-face and online, our e-learning, but also within the app. So for any of our indicators of pain, both in the face and elsewhere throughout the assessment, you'll see those little info bubbles next to the indicator. So if you go ahead and tap on that, you can see a detailed definition of specifically what you should be looking for and what that AI system is looking for. So in this case, I'm quite glad that I didn't activate cheek raising because that highlights that crow's feet are a key indicator, and I have a smooth, beautiful, unlined face. So that's our face domain. We're now going to move through because the face is really powerful. It's a really strong indicator as to an initial presence or absence of pain, but it is not the whole story, and it does not represent someone's overall condition in isolation. So we're going to swipe across now to our next domain, the voice. So your residents' vocalizations. I won't run through all of these different indicators in detail today, but I'll just highlight a couple. So we can see here things like repeatedly requesting help, very, very common. Things like screaming, crying, sighing, for example. So we select by just tapping on those toggles which indicators we can observe. Thinking back to those other means of observational pain assessment, like an Abbey pain scale, the questions you get asked there are, how severe do I think an overall domain is? Here are a couple of indicators to get me started, But the ultimate question is for me as an assessor, how severe do I think it is? So that's where that subjectivity and variation between different assessors can come into play. Whereas with a Painkchek assessment, we're presented with an exhaustive list of indicators, and the question is simply yes or no. Can I observe it or not? It doesn't matter if it's mild, moderate, severe, or you can barely sense it. If you can observe that indicator, you go ahead and document it. I've completed the voice domain. I'm going to swipe across now to the movement domain. We can see here things like restlessness, for example, pacing and wandering. Pacing and wandering, extremely common. Well, at the very least in every facility I've ever worked in, particularly in those dementia support units or memory support units, it's very common to see someone pacing and wandering. Behaviors like that can often be totally normalized. You know, it's just what David does. It's just what Brittany does. They're always pacing. But realistically, it is a common indicator of pain and something that we do need to document. So we find it's a great educational tool for your teams as well, thinking about what are common normalized behaviors, but we know are actually associated with pain. So I'll swipe again across now to the behavior domain. So here we can see things like physical aggression or confusion, another very, very common indicator. You might also notice on each of our domains, there's always an option at the bottom there. So in this case, it reads Alan, but Alan does not exhibit any of the above features. So if we can't observe any of these, we need to actively say none of the above. We can't just leave it blank. Additionally, you can see additionally, you can see we can make additional remarks. So if I tap in that little section, that little text box down the bottom, I can make sort of any additional comments that I'd like to, and I might put something in here like, you know, Alan was very distressed. Probably not a terribly useful clinical note there, but any additional details you choose to add. And you can do that on any domain separately. So we'll swipe through again now to the activity domain. So here we think about the resident's recent history. Things like, have they been resisting care or have their sleep cycles changed, for example. Then lucky last, we have the body domain. So here we've got some pretty straightforward clinical indicators. Things like, is the person we're assessing sweating profusely, and that's in a way that's inappropriate for the temperature? Are they breathing rapidly? Or we've got a couple of very, very common ones down the bottom, painful injuries and painful medical conditions. A painful injury could be anything from a pressure area, a wound, a recent fracture or sprain, strain, anything like that. Whereas a painful medical condition, that lucky last one there, is exceptionally common. I think as David highlighted earlier, diagnoses like osteoarthritis, osteoporosis are very common in the cohort of people who do require care in a center-based or in a residential setting. So almost everyone realistically has some form of painful medical condition, though thankfully not all. So we've now completed our assessment. We've gone through our face domain as supported by that AI tool. We've then gone through our remaining 5 domains in that binary checklist format. We now get to press display summary to see the outcome of that assessment. In this case for Alan, we can see what he's scored in each domain, and down the bottom, the overall score and pain rating for this assessment. So we can see that Alan has scored 14. So Painkchek's a little different. It's not a 0 to 10, it's a 0 to 42 scale. And that's just to cover the breadth of the different indicators included. However, those numbers are automatically converted into a pain rating of no pain, mild, moderate, or severe pain. You can see today, Alan's score is one of moderate pain. So that rating is the key piece of information for you to take away and to inform your clinical decision-making as to what intervention, if any, is going to be appropriate for the management of that individual's pain. So we'll go ahead and hit save now. By saving that assessment, you can see that it's been added straight to our pain record. So we can, if we want to, tap on this, we go in and review the details of that assessment, see what we've documented, but this is no longer editable. It's totally squared away and saved. Additionally, this information is all going to go through into VCare. So if you want to review it, you can review it right in your core system in VCare. So I'll very quickly also show you that numerical rating scale. So if I click on Assess Pain again, we also, of course, have that NRS option. So this is, as was highlighted, for people who can reliably self-report, or people who at the time can reliably self-report what they're experiencing. So I'll press Next, and we get a quick question here. Is the resident at rest or post-movement? Once again, just like last time, so we'll select at rest this time around. And then we have a simple question to ask our resident. And that's just, how much pain are they experiencing? So ask Alan to rate their pain on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is no pain and 10 is the worst pain imaginable. A pretty simple question. So we can ask our resident, ask the person we're assessing, they'll give us that response. Oh, I think it's pretty bad. It's about a 7 today. Well, we'll simply go ahead and document that on our slider, and we can then see that that number is converted to, again, a pain rating. So these are not just pulled out of a hat, but they are validated ratings there. So we can see a score of 7 is classified as severe pain. We can also, if we want to, document the body location that is, or a body location that is relevant to that person's experience. This is only available for the NRS where someone can reliably self-report, and we can tap that in here. So if we say something like left shoulder, and this is a free text box, but the system will remember anything that you enter. So I'll go ahead and save this one here just to show you. Once again, it's as easy as that to just save. We get a little prompt around the difference between a pain check and an NRS assessment. But if I go in and conduct another NRS assessment really quickly, I can, if I start typing, you can see that the left shoulder has popped up there. So if someone has recurring pain in an area, it's nice and easy to just select that from a list instead of worrying about typing something different out, messing up the spelling, that sort of thing. So those were our Painkchek and NRS assessments using the Painkchek application. There are more options here, like being able to review pain charts. We can see there's not too much detail in there for Mr. Mosby for his NRS and his Painkchek assessments. We can see he was assessed late last week and again today. And we can see he's had those 2 NRS assessments today. So we can see those visual pain charts right within the system, as well as, of course, those assessment records. But at this point, we've gone through the core functionality of the Painkchek tool, both observational and self-report assessment formats. So I'm pretty excited to hand over to Nazif and the team at VCare to give you a look at how that data flows directly into the system and all of the wonderful things that you can do there. So I won't steal your thunder, Nazif, and hand over to you.
Thank you, James. That was a very informative and interesting demo there. Loved your facial expressions. You did really well.
Appreciate it, mate.
That's all right. Okay, so I'll just start my screen sharing. Yeah. Share that. Cool. Yeah. So big kids do. Full screen. Oh, no, to go through it anyway. Cool. So as James pointed out, once they've finished and done the assessments in Painkchek, all that data sort of comes through to VCare. So yeah, we have set up the integration like we have with other external systems to download those Painkchek assessments, and we do it through a scheduled task. So that kind of sits there in the background and polls every 2 minutes. So once you've done an assessment, it will take around 2 minutes before that particular assessment is then in VCare, and you can preview it in there. So what I'll do initially is I'll talk you through the actual setup of the Painkchek assessment, and in that way kind of show you how the workflow can be set up around that particular assessment, so you can kind of manage that pain and kind of, you know, do the things that's required in managing that for your residents. So I won't take too much of your time, and I'll go straight into VCare to do that. think I might need to share my screen again. 1 second. Can everyone see that at the moment? Okay, I'm not sharing the right screen, sorry. No, I'll probably do that one because then we can see all of the screens. Yep, can you see that now? Excellent. Okay, so in VCare, we have all our assessments set up in here. And as you can see, we've got 2 in here, one for Painkchek, which was the one that's to do with the video, which takes the video of the person's face to assess what the pain is. And we also got the NRS one, which is basically them verbalizing the pain that they're experiencing. So I'll go through to the Painkchek one today. And as you can see, if I go to the sections and questions, we do have all the sections that James talked about that was on the Painkchek application. So on the face, you can see that, brow lowering, cheek raising, tightening eyelids, we've all got the Boolean values for that. So whether that happened or not, if I go through, there's the voice section, the movement, the behavior, activity, body, and then the outcome details, which gives you the overall score of what got assessed. Now, based on this particular score and the level that we get, we have set up levels in VCare. So 0, no level, 0 to 6, we've got no pain, 6 to 12, mild, 12 to 16, moderate, and 16 and over, we've got severe pain. So based on these levels now, we can then set up our triggers. And these are the ones that I've kind of set up right now as a demonstration. You are more than welcome to set up as many triggers as you like based on those levels. And if I go into, let's say, the moderate one, because we saw that Mr. Mosby was in moderate pain. So what it's actually saying is I want to trigger this based on the levels. So regardless of what level of pain they were in before, if there was no pain or severe pain, if they've now moved onto a moderate pain level, we want to set off this particular trigger. And so what else will happen once this trigger is raised? If I go to the next tab, we can see here that we can create a checklist of this particular type. If I go edit that checklist, you can see, again, it's something that I've set up for this demonstration purpose, that we can say that, check the pain management care plan group. So it's the care plan, the pain side, check mood and behavior, and check the personal abilities. So these will then trigger off the checklist of items, which will prompt your caregivers or your nurses, whoever is managing this resident, to go to those particular care plans and go to those care groups and input the right kind of information that's needed in managing this pain. So if I close out of that and come back here, so we've selected, that's the checklist that we want to raise. The other thing we can also do down here is for progress notes, we can actually create a progress note when this trigger is raised. And I've said that we want to raise a nursing note and also be able to email that. So currently I have selected the care home manager, but depending on the number of roles that you've set up in your organization, you can also send an email to those particular roles. And what they will receive is a nursing note in their email to just say that this person now has a pain assessment recorded and this was the level that got raised. So that's the setup side of the assessment in VCare. What I'll do is now I'll go straight to the particular resident. So if I go to my resident list, we've got Mr. Mosby here ready to go. If I go down to assessments, go to the pain assessment, Painkchek. And now you saw on James's list that there was 2 assessments done so far. So one on the 30th and one on the 6th. And the one on the 6th was the one that had the score of 14. So if I double click to open that, we can see the summary initially of it. And in the summary, you can see that the score was 14 and the level was moderate. And also a trigger has been raised as we set up to say that that person is in moderate pain. If I scroll down this summary, rather than clicking through those sections, you can actually see what's in here and what's been saved. So tightening of eyelids, yes. Closing eyes, yes. And all the stuff that James had triggered, you can see that that has come through. So as he said, you don't have to go back to the Painkchek application to review this. You can always just come into VCare because we have downloaded everything and you can see all the details in here. Now, the other thing that has happened is a checklist has been raised. So at this point, you can actually go and complete these items. I won't go into too much detail at the moment, because if I go into try and do the care plan, it'll take me through the whole care plan completion steps. But yeah, that will actually take you to the particular care plan, and you can open your care groups and define these are the problems that we've got. So we know the person is in moderate pain, and for moderate pain, these are the interventions that we kind of need to set up to kind of manage it. And those will then flow in through to the interventions schedule on the kiosk and on the web applications as well that we've recently developed. So your caregivers and your nurses, whoever is looking after the resident, they're able to go to that interventions list and see, okay, these are the steps now that I have to take to manage this person's pain, whether that be, making sure that they're comfortable, applying heat or cold treatments, or just making sure that their medications are being done. And you can also set up on there in the checklist to make sure that you've got, you're doing assessments every couple of days to see how the pain is being managed and if they're improving or not as well, which will be a very handy tool to have. So that's what we do in VCare, and that's how the workflow runs at the moment. The other thing to mention at the moment is currently with the triggers, it raises a checklist which takes you to the care plans. Now, if you've joined us for previous webinars, you would have seen that we now have an ability to link our assessments to care plans directly, like we have done with the inter-eye assessments. That is something that we will be doing for the Painkchek assessments as well. So we will enhance these features on here. So for the levels that comes out, you can actually specify straight away that I want this care level care group and these interventions to be updated with these particular descriptions, and they will flow through straight away automatically. So the workflow will just be, you will complete an assessment in Painkchek, it will automatically download into VCare, and once the assessment is downloaded, it will automatically create the care plan for you, plus the items for interventions will already be done, because you already would have predefined for, for these levels, this is what I want to appear in the interventions. So in that way, it'll make the whole process quite easy to be able to manage it. And given, that it's such a great assessment tool and you can kind of accurately measure everything, it makes it easier for us to be really confident in saying that, this is correct and this is the kind of interventions I need to kind of manage these. So that's pretty much the VCare side of things. I think now what we'll be doing is opening it up to questions. So fire away if you have any.
David, I've got a quick question that I was just quite keen to ask you. What sort of outcomes can an aged care facility expect after they've implemented Painkchek alongside VCare?
Yeah, great question, Brittany. We've got an extensive list of case studies we're happy to share with the team, but I think in summary, we're really looking at a few key things. It's one, identifying that presence of pain that's not obvious, but that's going to directly impact medication. So quite topical here in the Australian market, as I'm sure it is in the New Zealand market, around corrective medications and the overuse of psychotropic medications. So we're really looking at how we can impact the medicine drawer there as well, regarding making sure those interventions around, is it pain or dementia driving those behaviours, the right medication is delivered. I think another key thing is looking at, like I said earlier in my presentation, around whether we like it or not, team, I think there is some sort of clinical hierarchy. I really like our Painkchek kind of breaks down that clinical hierarchy. So empowering a carer to have a conversation with a nurse regarding an outcome for Painkchek and, hey, I've observed this, let's make this intervention. It's not just my opinion, it's a medical advice, validating that. So I suppose empowering caregivers to obviously engage with other clinicians like GPs and physios, for example. But also we're looking at obviously giving back clinical time to clinical people. So I think that's a key thing that Painkchek is really championed in the Australian market. In my time here in Australia, I've seen clinicians go from, so clinically focused to be bogged down in accreditation and royal commissions and funding models. So really looking at giving back clinicians clinical time to focus on better care outcomes through our integrations in the VCare. So there's not a duplication of effort, there's no double handling of data, and there's no risk of human error. So I suppose that's some of the key things we're looking to drive. But obviously the main thing is identifying that pain and treating that pain when it's not obvious is the key clinical outcome we're looking to drive.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have any questions that they wanted to ask?
I had a question about, so on the Painkchek app on the phone, there was another couple of tabs, wasn't there? There was a tab about pain relief, and there was another one that I just can't recall what it was. So what's in that pain relief tab? And if you enter something in there, does that talk to VCare as well? And I'm wondering how that would integrate with the MediMap integration. So if you're giving PRN pain relief and that information is coming through to the progress notes, how does that all kind of tie together?
I might jump in for that one and
Great
say,
question, Lindley.
yeah, Lindley, you've got some very keen eyes on you. I will highlight. So I'll just share my screen again to quickly show you those items. Hopefully this comes right through. So I believe these tabs to the right-hand side were what you were referring to.
Yeah.
So these features, so general comment, this is a general comments field to the furthest on the right. So within Painkchek, comments can be made against the individual. These are separate from the comments made within an assessment. In general, this is a feature that we would, if I'm entirely honest, toggle off by default. Because we should be with that integration documenting in one central place, which is of course VCare. And the same does go for pain relief. So this is an option that's included for our clients who are potentially, well, knowing that the vast majority of people on this call would be VCare users. It's more geared towards people who are working in a paper-based environment where they don't already have a digital means of documenting pain relief, for example. So here we can add medications, which we can either manually input or select from a pre-built list. And the same goes for therapy, so non-pharmacological interventions. So we could add therapy. I don't believe we have a list set up here, so we'll just say manually, but we could do something like RN massage, for example, and add the details there to document in the system when it took place. At current time, these sections, the pain relief and comments, are not directly integrated through to VCare. We do have some availability of fields in MediMap. So if you did want to turn that on, you would be able to document something like, you would be able to manually document a Painkchek score in MediMap. Again, something that we're looking to enhance as we move forward. But as I say, those features would typically be toggled off by default in an implementation of Painkchek to avoid any confusion or documentation in an inappropriate place. So you would just really see the Painkchek you would just see the assessment record and the charting available there.
Thanks for that, James. I think I'll jump in as well at the end of that. So Lindley, in VCare, I guess you can probably set up the checklist items to say that you need to go into MediMap to do the medications, and we do have the integration set up on our end to do the to get the PRNs from MediMap. So those PRNs will then be downloaded and stored against the resident. So if you've got in your checklist to go to MediMap to apply the medication that's quite required, the PRNs will come down and be stored against the resident. So you do have that nice audit trail of where everything's at and the history of it as well.
Okay, just while we're talking about the integration with MediMap, is there any progress on the integration of the efficacy of the PRN medication coming through to VCare?
I'll step in there.
Yeah, thanks.
Richard here. Yeah, we haven't got any further with that yet. MediMap have just released their new integration engine, which we're hoping we can harness that and progress that efficacy thing for updating the note about the PRN and matching it back to that efficacy note that subsequently gets put in there. So we haven't been able to do that with their previous integration that they made available to us, but we're hoping that with their new integration engine, we will be able to progress that.
Perfect, thanks for that, Lindley. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, well, I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for their time this morning. You'll be receiving an email from us shortly, just sending through the slides from today in case you want to refer back to them, a recording of the video, as well as the white paper resource that was promised as well. So you'll get it from us. And if you have any questions, or if you'd like to dive into anything further, just let us know, get in touch, and we'd love to go through some more with you. But thanks again and have a lovely day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much, everyone.
Thanks for your time. Take care.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Ted.